Before we get to the video, I want to tell you that we read the comments you leave on our videos about our narrator's monotone voice. Well, I'm Nick and I do the audio editing for Paranormally Listed, and I agree, his voice can help you fall asleep. But when I am editing his voice, it's hard to stay awake and focused, but I have something now to help me, and it's today's sponsor, Endel. Before I start editing, I turn on the Endel app on my phone and let the soundscape center my concentration. Endel is great. They are an environment-based app that takes everything we know about sound and combines them with cutting-edge technology. The app really helps me stay awake and focused on editing audio. The results are real-time personalized soundscapes designed to help you relax, focus, and sleep. Not only does it help me with my audio editing, I have used it to boost my productivity by helping me concentrate for longer periods of time on other parts of the channel. Endel uses patented core technology that adapts in real time to personal inputs like location, weather, and also using heart rate and circadian rhythm to personalize sounds for maximum effect. If you suffer from ADHD or sleeping disorders, Endel will be able to help because their soundscapes are based on neuroscientific and psychoacoustic principles. Endel is informed by science, created with science, and backed by science. So if our narrator's voice doesn't put you to sleep, try a more scientific approach and download Endel. Endel has a great deal for our viewers. The first 100 people to download Endel by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code will get a free week of audio experiences. If you're like me and you need help boosting your concentration levels, download Endel. But not only do you get the better focus, you get to try the relaxing and sleeping soundscapes. Again, download Endel by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code, and by doing so, you will be helping support Paranormally Listed.
Number 3. Khao Hill, Thailand. Two sisters in Thailand can add alien communicators to their resumes. They are 63-year-old Somjit Raypath and Arjun Wasnia Chensanam. They founded the group called Khao in Thailand. The group is named after the village of the same name. There, the group sits on a hill and meditates. Deep in meditation, group members supposedly receive telepathic messages from aliens. The messages warn of upcoming natural disasters. It sounds wild, but the thing is, the group has been right before. One member named Mark Kunamusta is a financial planner in Bangkok. On March 10, 2011, he uploaded a video saying Asia would get an earthquake and a tsunami. The next day, a magnitude 9 earthquake shook Japan. It's the biggest earthquake the country's had in recent history. Not only that, but the earthquake also caused a tsunami. Sadly, more than 15,000 people died. More than 450,000 people lost their homes. The tsunami also caused nuclear reactors to melt down, and radioactive material made the environment toxic. People wondered how Mark could have possibly predicted that. He said he received the message telepathically from aliens. The group also accurately predicted a tsunami in Indonesia in 2004. The disaster killed more than 225,000 people from a dozen countries around the Indian Ocean. In 2017, the group predicted that World War III would start in 2022. And that's eerily relevant today as World War III appears in the headlines related to Russia invading Ukraine. In 1997, Church Now was the first person to receive a message. He was the father of Somjit and Ajarn. He was also a former sergeant major. One day he was meditating when he received his first message. A few months later, Chur got a message that a UFO would appear above Khao Mountain on a specific day at a specific time. On that day, 10,000 people waited on the mountain to see the craft, and they did see it at the exact time Chur predicted. They even have a photo of it. Then Somjit and Ajarn meditated alongside their dad and started receiving messages too. Chur died in 2000, and his daughters carried on the legacy. Now the group has thousands of members. Business executives, doctors, scientists, and former government workers are part of the group. And they've amassed hundreds of pictures and videos of UFOs. The group members say that they talk to aliens from Pluto and aliens from a planet called Loku Kok Tok Pak Ondi Kong. The aliens have similar values as Buddhists, and they believe that Buddhists could understand their culture. The aliens from Pluto are made of gas. The aliens from the other planet look like the aliens known as the Greys. They have big heads and eyes, and of course, they're gray. The aliens are contacting humans because they're worried about war and environmental destruction on Earth. They supposedly have advanced technology and will help protect humans. The group says that Khao Mountain has a dimensional gate, which is why the aliens go there. But the police have been preventing the group from gathering on the mountain. The police say they're infringing on protected forests and they're illegally camping. The TV show Expedition X investigated the group. The premise of the show is that a scientist and a paranormal researcher investigate claims of monsters and paranormal and alien encounters. The host visited the mountain and saw inexplicable lights in the sky while Khao was meditating. They even caught it on camera. They also heard a strange mechanical sound and chased after it, but the sound kept moving. With all this strange activity, they pulled out their electromagnetic meter. The meter spiked even though there was nothing on the mountain, like cell phone towers, to make that happen. Also, Khao members get warm when they're receiving messages from aliens. So the Expedition X host set up a thermal reader while the group was meditating. One member was so hot that the thermal reader registered his face as white while everyone else's was red. White is way hotter than red. Once the group was done meditating, the host asked if he received a message from aliens. The man who was white hot said he had, but he couldn't understand the message yet. So until the message is decoded, we'll just brace, I guess, for another disaster. Number 2, George Van Tassel, Giant Rock and Integration. In August 1953, George Van Tassel was living under a rock. We don't mean that in the metaphorical turn-of-phrase sense. Van Tassel was literally living under a giant freestanding boulder in the Mojave Desert in California. The boulder is 7 stories high and covers more ground than a professional basketball court. His friend, Frank Kritzer, had excavated the ground underneath the boulder. In the 1930s, Kritzer was a prospector who lived in the desert. He didn't have much money, so he dug under the giant rock so he could live for free on government land. Kritzer figured that the space underneath the rock would be a comfortable temperature all year since the huge boulder would absorb the heat and the cold. In 1942, Kritzer got on the government's radar because he refused to enlist to fight in the Second World War. Kritzer had served in the German Navy during the First World War. He also put a radio antenna on top of a nearby mountain. The fact that Kritzer lived in a desolate space under a giant rock didn't help. So rumors spread that he was a German spy. Kritzer did have a radio, but it wasn't the kind that could transmit messages to Germany. He was also a U.S. citizen. Even so, the rumor that he was a spy made its way to the American police. In 1942, 3 deputies visited him. Kritzer emerged from the rock and greeted them outside. They said that Kritzer had to go to the station for questioning. Kritzer said he first had to grab his coat. He headed under the rock. The deputies thought he was doing something sketchy. After all, the rumor was that he was a German spy. So they lobbed a tear gas grenade through a window. Unfortunately, the grenade landed on dynamite that Kritzer had stored under a table. The dynamite exploded, killing Kritzer and injuring the deputies. George Van Tassel must have been saddened by the news. George had visited Kritzer at the rock several times when Kritzer was living there. In 1945, George applied to the Bureau of Land Management to acquire the land around Giant Rock. In 1947, his application was approved. George Van Tassel moved to the rock with his wife Eva and their 3 daughters. On August 24, 1953, George woke up in the middle of the night to an alien. The space creature looked like a human in a gray bodysuit. He spoke in English and introduced himself as Sodunda from Venus. He said he was 700 years old. He must have had a great face routine because George said he looked no older than 28. so Dunda invited George on board the UFO. So Dunda gave George the blueprints for a machine that would allow time travel and extend people's lives. Behold, the integration in Landers, California. The white dome was pieced together without any nails, screws, or metal of any sort, at the request of Soldunda. Metal would disturb the electromagnetic field the structure aimed to create. The white dome structure has 2 floors. The upstairs has 16 windows and a vaulted ceiling. The shape and the wood construction gives the integration great acoustics. Even a whisper will be amplified because of the structure's material and shape. Outside, there are metal poles around the structure that are supposed to turn in the wind. The poles would create static electricity that would charge cells inside the dome. George thought that the structure could charge a human body like a car's battery can be charged. So Dunda said that the integration would add 50 to 80 years to a healthy human's lifespan. George took this plan and started building the integration in Landers, California in 1957. He raised money for more than 20 years by hosting UFO conventions at Giant Rock every year. As many as 10,000 people attended the conventions. The conventions included lectures, presentations from people who contacted aliens, and space movies. George didn't know how to finish the integration because he was waiting for more information from Soldunda. He also didn't get a chance to finish it because he died in 1978 from a heart attack. George Van Tassel was 67 years old when he died. George's wife sold the building after he passed away. The Bureau of Land Management filled in the space under the giant rock. Today, the integration is used for sonic baths. The sound baths claim to be relaxing, rejuvenating, and inspire introspection, but they don't promise to extend someone's life for several decades. Number 1. Jim Penniston and the Rendlesham Forest Incident Secret Code. A mysterious craft, a secret code, and a legend of a lost city. One of the most famous UFO sightings in the UK has become a legend. But there's more to the legend than the sighting itself. Because decades after this sighting, Jim Penniston may have cracked the secret code. And he thinks the American government is covering something up. It all started on December 26, 1980. Penniston was working as the security supervisor at the Woodbridge U.S. Air Force Base in Suffolk, England. The base was surrounded by the Rendlesham Forest. Staff at Heathrow Tower called Woodbridge because they saw something flying over the base on their radar. The Woodbridge base saw something on their radar too. Penniston and his colleagues saw lights in the forest flashing yellow, orange, red, and blue. At first, it seemed a plane had crashed, but there was no smoke and no one heard an explosion. One of the airmen said that it hadn't crashed, it had landed. Airman Penniston, John Burroughs, and Ed Cabansing went to the woods to investigate. They drove to the edge of the forest. Cabansing stayed in the car while Penniston and Burroughs went into the woods. The radios weren't working normally. As Penniston moved toward the light, he could feel static electricity all around him. Walking became harder, almost like he was walking through waist-high water. He couldn't hear anything, not even his footsteps. It was like the air was gone. But then, animals around them started making distress calls. The white lights dissipated, revealing a black triangular craft. The 2 airmen were experts on airplanes, but it was unlike anything they had ever seen. Burroughs and Penniston got on the ground and watched it for 10 minutes. Nothing happened. Because Penniston was in charge of security, he had to figure out if this mysterious thing was a threat. Penniston pulled out his notebook and moved around the craft. He looked at Burroughs, who was engulfed in a beam of light that looked like it was shining on him from above. It was as if Burroughs was frozen. Penniston yelled at Burroughs, but he didn't acknowledge him. Penniston went back to his duty. The craft was about 9 feet long and about 8 feet high, with a type of dorsal fin. Oddly, the flying object didn't have any typical features of an aircraft, like wings, exhaust, and a crew compartment. Penniston took photos of the craft. He also noticed writing on the side. He was relieved, thinking he'd see Air Force in big letters, but no, the writing was more like symbols. He saw a triangle with a circle around it and smaller circles around that. He touched the triangle symbol and a big, bright light blinded him. At that moment, a series of ones and zeros appeared in his mind. He lifted his hand off. The craft emitted a bright, white light. Penniston thought it was going to explode, so he backed away and got down on the ground. The craft lifted and flew up impossibly fast beyond the trees. Eventually, it disappeared. There was no sound or air displacement. Nothing. Burroughs and Penniston returned to the base. They thought they would have to report what they had seen. But it turned out that security had already filed a report saying that there were lights in the woods and a team investigated. Penniston was aware that everything that had just happened was a bit unbelievable, so he didn't mention that he had touched the craft or he had received a code. Penniston dropped off his roll of film at a photo development lab. Penniston and Burroughs found out that their watches said 4:15 a.m., while everyone else's at the base said 5 a.m. It was as if time had stopped or slowed down for them. At least 60 other Air Force personnel saw the craft land and take off. Now, it was 8:30 a.m. on December 27th. Penniston and Burroughs and several officers examined the area where the craft had landed. There were burnt rings on the ground. There was also 3 indentations in a triangular shape that were equal distances apart. The other officers told Penniston and Burroughs to go home, so they did. After a long night, Penniston finally got home at around 9:30 a.m. He tried to keep busy instead of ruminating on what had happened. That night he couldn't sleep. All he could think about were ones and zeros. He wrote down a series of ones and zeros in his Air Force notebook and felt relieved. The code took up 16 pages of his notebook. While Penniston was restlessly writing out this code, he was unaware that the lights had returned to the base. 18-year-old law enforcement airman Lorianne Bayoun started her overnight shift. In the middle of the night, she spotted a red, orange, blue, and white sphere of light in the forest. The light dropped below the tree line. She didn't know the same thing happened the night before. Bayoun called her colleagues. 5 others joined Bayoun, and they watched the lights. They called the security police. Second Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin and Master Sergeant Bobby Ball were sent to investigate. Bayoun and her colleagues were listening to Tamplin and Ball on their radios. Through the radio, Bayoun heard that Tamplin had lost track of Ball. She sounded scared. Then Bayoun lost radio contact with them for 10 minutes. During that time, Tamplin's car was hit with a beam of light, and the car suddenly died. Tamplin ran from the car. That's all that's known about what happened. Tamplin was relieved of duty, and the rumor was that she was traumatized by whatever had happened. Burroughs was told this story when he went to work in the morning and saw the report. On the evening of December 27, 1980, Air Force officers spotted the lights again. Lieutenant Bruce Unglin and Staff Sergeant Monroe Neville saw the lights in the woods. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt was frustrated with the talk at the base about UFOs, so Halt and 4 others investigated the woods. They were Master Sergeant Bobby Ball, Lieutenant Unglin, Staff Sergeant Nevels, and Sergeant Adrian Bastina. Halt grabbed a tape recorder and night vision goggles and entered the woods. They tried to use floodlights in the woods, but they weren't working. They also used flashlights and night vision. Their vehicle engines also started acting funny. The radios also kept cutting out. Through their night vision, they noticed the trees were glowing. They measured radiation and found out it was high. They also noticed the ground was scorched and trees were bent. Nevels took photos. Halt's recordings that night have since been made public. If you would like to hear the recordings, check out the link in the description box below. The investigating crew took samples from trees and soil. While they were doing this, things got a little weirder. The lights were tracked to the edge of the woods, where they found a farmhouse glowing red from the light. The light made the farmhouse appear to be on fire. They observed the lights for more than 2 hours. The lights seemingly changed shapes and broke into several different lights. At least one of them sent down a beam. Hall and his team watched a beam of light close to another Air Force base at Bentwaters. Many people back at the Bentwaters base saw the beam too. Hall said that the air felt like it was charged with static electricity. The last recording of the tape is at 4 a.m. By 5 a.m., the team returned to the base. We assume by this time the lights were gone. When the photos Neville's and Penniston took were developed, they came out white. The photos could have turned out white because of the radiation in the area. By Sunday, December 28th, Penniston had learned that the Woodbridge base had 2 outside teams coming in to investigate the landing site. One was a group of scientists from a base in Western Europe. The other was a group from an Air Force base in Virginia. The teams investigate sensitive matters related to the Air Force. So the next morning, Penniston was ordered to appear at the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, also known as OSI. He was introduced to the agents he had never met. During that meeting, Penniston was told to memorize a statement that the OSI had written for him. At this point, Penniston hadn't told anyone he had touched the craft. So Penniston didn't write that in his statement with the OSI either. Over the next few months, Penniston said he was interviewed several times. Penniston stuck to the half-page statement he memorized. Penniston said that the CIA, NSA, and other intelligence agencies got involved. Holt wrote a report about what he and his team saw, and he submitted it to the British military authorities. The information of those 3 days became classified, and no one else was allowed to talk about or find out more information about the case. The Ministry of Defense also investigated. Ultimately, the MOD and the Air Force dropped the case. They felt there was no obvious explanation and no threat, so nothing more was done. In 1983, the British government released Holt's memo about the first night of the incident under the Freedom of Information Act. Holt's recordings were eventually released too. The media published stories about the UFOs at the Woodbridge and Bentwaters air bases. Penniston noted that the stories were embellished and called them cover stories. But Penniston and Burroughs have maintained that they think that the Air Force was covering something up. Perhaps as a cover-up for what Penniston would eventually discover after he retired from the U.S. Air Force in October 1993. In 1994, Penniston started seeing a therapist because he couldn't sleep. He started hypnosis, and the therapist recorded their sessions. Under hypnosis, Penniston talked about a second meeting with OSI. He said he was given and may have agreed to take sodium pentothal. The drug is kind of a truth serum. Penniston's book, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, the inside story of the world's best documented UFO incident, suggests he was given this drug to not only spill the truth about the binary code, but also to use the drug to block his memory of it. Penniston has no conscious memory of this specific interrogation. His only memory came out under hypnosis. Years later, Holt publicly said that Penniston and Burroughs were interrogated and, quote, messed with. The 2 retired airmen have been fighting for years to get their medical records. After the incident in the forest, both suffered health problems they had never experienced. Burroughs' gums turned white. Penniston developed vestibular issues. Both suffered from heart problems. By age 52, Burroughs already had a pacemaker. The 2 have been fighting to get veterans' medical care. Also, their doctors want to see their records to understand what they may have encountered in the forest. The problem is that they haven't been able to access their medical records. Unfortunately, they may have been able to access their medical records, but they were told they don't exist. Not only that, but many of the reports and records of the incidents are allegedly gone, as well as the soil and tree samples. During Penniston's hypnosis sessions, he revealed what he thinks that the code of ones and zeros could be. To see Penniston's hypnosis session, check out the link in the description box below. To sum up, what Penniston's theory on what the meaning of the binary code is that it's a message from time travelers who are humans from the far distant future. They are tasked with collecting human genetics to save the race of the future. In 2010, Penniston and Burroughs were talking to a documentary filmmaker. The producer was looking at Penniston's Air Force notebook. The producer saw the code and asked about it. That's how Penniston's code became public. Computer and geography experts examined Penniston's code. Here's the message that came out of it. Exploration of humanity. Origin, parenthesis, 52.0942532N, 13.131269W, parenthesis. Continuous for planetary advancement. Origin year 8100. If you search the coordinates, it's in the Atlantic Ocean. But it turns out these coordinates line up with a mythical island called High Brazil. The Library of Congress said the island never existed, but the legend goes it was an island west of Ireland. The island allegedly appeared on maps from 1300s to the 1800s. The island was only visible one day every 7 years, otherwise fog blocked its view. Real explorers from those centuries long ago described the island and put it on maps. Some have even allegedly visited the island. But the decode message also revealed more coordinates, including the following: the Mayan Canna Pyramid in Belize, Sedona, Arizona in the U.S., the ancient Egyptian pyramid, Giza, Nazca Plain in Peru, Mount Taishan in China, and the Temple of Apollo in Greece. So, what do all these have in common? Many of them are home to history's greatest engineering advancements. People have often amazed that these ancient civilizations were able to make impressive and enduring structures without the use of advanced technology. Fast forward to 2013, Burroughs and Penniston were invited to a public hearing. They got to tell their story of a potential cover-up to former members of Congress. This was the first congressional official hearing about extraterrestrials or UFOs since 1968. 2 years later, Burroughs and Penniston received a payout for their medical expenses, though it's not clear what the amount was. But still, whatever happened over those 3 nights in 1980 and why remains a mystery. One theory skeptics have blamed is a nearby lighthouse. But Penniston, Burroughs, and Halt said that they saw the lighthouse and these other lights were separate. Others say that the lights were a prank. But Burroughs and Penniston believe that they've been emotionally and physically affected by what happened to them at the base. John Burroughs said in the 2013 congressional hearing, "Is it because of the nuclear issue, or is it because it's UFOs?" Burroughs, whatever we're dealing with, bringing up alien stuff, and that almost makes people shy away immediately. Believes that why our government is holding what they are because of power. Thinks they want to take that technology for war. Being covered up because everyone is racing to use this technology against each other. And if this message is from our future selves, that's something we might want to hear more of in the next few years. Because Penniston plans on releasing another book which will all be about the binary code. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. We also have a podcast about cold cases that were eventually solved called Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.